want to go through a couple of the main three disorders, and we'll talk about how some of the treatment targets are sleeping alone for the separation anxious kid. Now, these are typical targets, right? Sleeping in their own bed. And yes, we have teenagers in bed with their parents. We do. But there are things that will also hit on the adolescent transition issues. Going away on school trips. There are separation anxious teenagers who won't do these. Staying at home periods. When a parent goes out, I'm not talking about overnight, but extended periods. No contact with parent during the day. Parents who work and have been barraged with phone calls through the course of the day. And of course, we have to work with here the parent who wants to know every move their child makes. And where is the balance in there that has to be struck that's reasonable and instills a sense of competency and confidence in the teenager for handling their time and their issues. Applying for and seeking activities such as that separate them from the family, such as jobs and stuff, visiting colleges on their own, and then traveling short distances alone. Parents have a hard time sometimes even with that. Why can't a group of 14-year-olds who have access to reasonable public transportation. Now, I've been out of Florida in terms of making my way around.
Yeah. Be careful.
Is there doesn't Metro Rail go to like Dolphin Stadium? Aren't there buses that pick you up at a shopping center and take you and then come? No, gosh, it's tough. Yeah, well, so in New York, for example, downtown Miami, you get that. But what we're talking about again is, wait a minute now. I went to high school. Hold on now. I went to high school in Fort Lauderdale, as I said. And a group of us girls, I'll never forget this, sophomore year, we arranged, the big cheese, she's going to be meeting with us this weekend in the reunion too, arranged to go by Greyhound bus to Disney World for the day. We had to get on the darn bus at 6 a.m. We were up at Disney World by 9. And we were back on a bus at 5. And then at 4, we were sophomores, 15. There were 6 of us. I'll never forget, it was so much fun. Oh, look at the moms in the front of the room are going crazy. Oh my gosh.
Mom, I wouldn't have been allowed to. By 16, I could.
So you know what? In senior year, we stayed overnight. So in senior year, they let us stay overnight. So anyway, I'm going to go home and hug my mom. Man, I'm so proud of her. So traveling short distances. All right, social phobia. The targets in social phobia. Everybody's looking at me like I'm going to get like, the
some of it's cultural.
Cultural?
I think some of it is very cultural. I mean, at least for me, growing up, I heard stories of my parents that couldn't go out without a chaperone. I'm sure to you that's like shocking, but that's culturally what was normal for us. So for my parents to let me go out at 16, 17 alone, that was a big deal.
Right.
Now, for me, 14 on a bus alone, that's just not reasonable.
She's having a panic attack here.
Yeah.
Girl, I know, I'm trying to hit your parenting buttons, and it's obviously working. Okay, let's send the boys on the bus.
Even then, it would be an issue.
All right.
More so.
I'm going to give, Wendy Silverman is going to take your number so that you can arrange an appointment at the clinic here. Wendy, I got one for you. Okay, my goodness, she's having a panic. Look at her, poor thing.
I mean, I'm just, like, I know some of the populations of the families that we work with, and
Right.
we have a lot of families that we work with that recently immigrated to
Right.
Florida.
Well, we do, we have to work with, absolutely got to work within family beliefs and parenting. But there are things that they can do that still, so then get them cooking for the family.
Right, and
or
there's
doing
things
something a little different.
Right, and there's things that I think are, within parameters that are kind of, you find a balance. But I think some of the stuff, especially if I walk into a family and I start telling them these things, they're going to...
Well, wait. This is not telling the parents
No, but,
this. It's,
talking-
again,
bringing
engaging
stuff-
with them and bringing out from them. Now, here, let me give you an interesting example of this. Another family that I work with. Now, these are definitely, like 8th generation Americans or whatever. And, family with means and stuff. And here the mom is my patient, actually, for her GAD. And the thing with this mom, she had a son who was a senior in high school. This was late April of his senior year, and he was going to be heading off to a very famous college in Boston that our current president did actually graduate from, even though Donald Trump wants to make it look like he didn't. And the mother, so one day I have an appointment set with the mom, and the mom calls me and she says, I'm going to have to cancel. I have to take my son to the doctor for his physical for Harvard. And I said, do you want to find another time? She says, well, it's just that, he's in school all the way uptown, and our physician is downtown, so I got to drive him there. So I said, well, Carol, why don't you just let him take the subway? It goes, it goes right there. Oh my gosh, I can't, no, the subway. I can't let him take, my kids don't ride public transportation, it's scary. To her. So I said to her, oh, hold on. Okay, second, I said, we're going to deal with the issue of a 17-year-old boy going to visit a doctor to fill out a health form anyway, which is essentially check, check, check. But I said, let me ask a question. You're so excited about him getting in, he's going to go to Harvard next year, right? Oh, yes, we're all excited. I said, Harvard is in Cambridge. The Red Sox will be playing the Yankees at Kenmore Square. And having lived in Massachusetts for a year, I said, that means when his buddy, I said, do you want him to go to baseball games? Oh, of course. I said, when his buddies from the dorm want to go to that game, they are going to get on the Red Line subway, take it into Quincy Market, transfer to the Green Line to take it out to Kenmore Square. What is your boy going to do? Call a car service? Are you kidding? And she's like, well, I said, we got to work on this. And because, there's times when maybe for her and her family, different reasons, granted, post 9/11 in New York, I gave slack to families with riding subways for a while and things that they were very anxious about. But there comes a time where things, developmentally need to be taken on, no matter what culture we're coming from, and you'll get there, but it's going to be dictated by the family and the context they live in, and also the anxiety and whether a bit of a push against that anxiety is important, even if we have to sacrifice a little bit of cultural stuff. But you're going to do that in an engaged way, collaboratively with the parents. You're not going to shove it at them, all right? So we'll work with that. In social phobia, got a few minutes here, a lot of the issues that we work with are the teenager interacting with others without the intervention of a family member, of the parent. Making returns to stores on their own. There's a Gap across the street from my office, and it's hysterical. I always have a bag under my desk, 2 bags actually. One is girls, a woman's white t-shirt, actually I have one on, and the other is a men's white t-shirt. And what I send and they have the receipt in the bag, and every week I'm sending 1 or 2 teenagers to exchange them. And once they come back, then they have to exchange them again immediately. Go back to the same clerk, tell them, oh, actually, you want it in a different color now. A couple of things. Doing it on their own. Imposing upon someone. And imposing again on somebody. These are things that for teenagers who are not used to interacting with people in the work world, people in authority, figures outside of the teachers at school, and they shy away from these things, and the parents are the ones always doing it, we have to get them doing it. So this is some of the things that we do that you can set up if you have the convenience of having a store or something close by. We do a lot in terms of assertiveness with our teenagers, and here we'll send them outside of our office with clipboards with a survey to stop people and ask different questions. And we have different kinds of questions about political, we have questions about the traffic in New York. In New York City, they put these new bicycle paths in. This is the hot one to ask about. So what do you think of the bike paths and the seating areas on Broadway and stuff, and you get people's opinions. Kids this is something they have to learn to do that's independent of the parents, is engage with another adult, ask questions, hear about different types of opinions, and our instructions are to gather the opinions of someone, but then to offer your own to that person and counter their opinion and see what happens. So because they're going to have to be negotiating this on their own as a developmental transition task. So we do that along with some of our other just general social phobia targets, such as breaking into conversations and things along those lines. And then with generalized anxiety, for our teenagers here, a lot is about ambiguity. The two major cognitive distortions in anxiety are catastrophizing and overestimating the likelihood of something happening. So they catastrophize an outcome, the worst could happen, and it's absolutely going to happen. And it's going to happen to me. So this is why a lot of what-if questioning occurs from individuals with GAD, is they want to try to understand everything about the situation, so they've got it in hand and they can try to predict it and they'll know how to work with it and so forth. So we want them to handle ambiguity and not knowing something sometimes. Not knowing what's going to happen. So we try to work in different ways of manipulating that variable. And sometimes what it is we may have the parents not tell them, to tell them that we've got some plans that are coming up, but we're going to make plans for the family, but you know what? We're going to do it on our own without you being involved, and we'll let you know when the time comes. Because kids with GAD want to be involved in every step of things and so on and so forth. So it may be not involving them as much and letting parents do things that parents do typically on their own, make decisions on changing the carpet. You get the kids' input on things like that. Maybe not now. We're going to leave them a little bit out of some things, so it's more ambiguous. Yep.
Why would they need to be involved in everything if they have GAD?
Well, that's over-controlling because a lot of times they ask, and again, when we talked earlier today about parents who, sometimes they give a lot of information thinking it's going to be helpful. Some parents will just spring it on kids. So we want to go more to a, have a healthy sense of ambiguity, not have to know all the parameters, and as things unfold, you learn how to roll with it. It's learning how to be more flexible in your thinking. Handling negative feedback is a very big one for kids with GAD, and making mistakes is very big. And receiving bad news. So we actually practice by sending letters of rejection for things that we have them apply for that's fake applying, but just the whole act of doing this and opening letters of rejection. We teach them about making a wall of shame, which is what we called our college rejection wall, where we hung up our letters, my friends and I, for different schools we got rejected from. And things like how to manage in a more reasonable way. Yeah, there's places you're not going to get into. There are places you will, though, and how to work with that. But all the way around, it's more about handling for the GADs negativity, unknown, ambiguity, and not having to be perfect and right on top of everything. Just to sum up before we take a break here, the symptoms of anxiety is anxious anticipation of upcoming events, a focus on those threat cues, negative thoughts about your competency, and increased physiological arousal. So these things we'll be working with, plus transitions. We're going to finish up the afternoon with how we're doing the treatments. I mean, you've been hearing about treatment stuff all along, but I'm going to come back to my teenagers I've talked about, and we'll work with that as we wrap up. But let's wrap into the treatment. Core beliefs in anxiety stem from anxious apprehension. The general idea here is that some terrible thing is going to happen or happen again, and I can't predict when or where, so I got to be ready at all times. But yet I don't have the skill, the knowledge, or the ability to deal, right? This is the process of anxiety. And the predictions is that whatever happens is going to lead to embarrassment, humiliation, rejection, loss of control, a catastrophe, loss of social status, death and dying, as in panic. So this is enough to keep people really anxious, right? Thinking those thoughts? And think about young people, as we talked about, the teenagers who are wrapped with these anxieties, as they're going through a time of life when you really don't have worries the way you will when you're an adult. But really, it is the time of life we want them to enjoy. We want them to grow and explore and mature. You know, you want to be there for them. And you want them to really be able to access this without these weights on them. So that's why I talk about the different kids that I've worked with, because they really were weighed down with this anxiety in such a way that it was really coloring what adolescence was for them. It was not a good period of life. How we begin with psychoeducation, teaching them about anxiety, that it's normal to a certain degree. I like to say everybody needs this much. And those who have this much tend to take too many risks. And then those who have this much tend to really shrink their world and not take enough risks. So we need to have this much. Just enough anxiety to motivate us, to help us to do things. Small doses are important, are good for us. We break anxiety into the three components: what you're thinking, physically what you're feeling, and what you do. And any of the anxiety approaches that you can find, from Dr. Silverman's to Phil Kendall's to Debbie Beidel's, we have our approach out. All these different models or approaches use the same CBT. The same CBT, but they have different takes on it, whether it's for a different population, social anxiety versus obsessive compulsive disorder versus PTSD. It's going to be same components, but maybe packaged in different ways, depending on the age of the child and things like that. And here we're talking about packaging things in such a way that we involve the parents a little bit with the teenagers.
So are there any good self-help or books for parents or?
So the question here is about, are there good books for parents, self-help books and stuff? There are very good books out there. When Dr. Silverman has some, but there's, if I
would like to have a resource.
Yeah. What's going to happen with these workshops is when they go up online, there's also going to be a list of resources and all that go along with each of the talks. But in the same time, let me throw out some names. Tamar Chansky, Chansky. She has a number of self-help books out that are excellent.
Could you spell it again?
Chansky. That negative reinforcement slide has her name on it. She's got some good self-help books, or books written for parents. John March's book for parents of children with OCD is wonderful. Wendy, do you have a parent book?
I don't have a parent book. I have a clinician book.
So Wendy has,
Okay, what's that?
those of us,
Another parent book would be
Cynthia
Cynthia Last.
Last. I actually have a parent book in the works that'll be out hopefully in another year and a half. Ron Rapay, wonderful book for young children, parents of young children, Helping Your Anxious Child, by Ron Rapay, R-A-P-E-E, and his colleagues. I mean, I'll tell you a website to go to a couple of them. www. We all got the dots. abct.org. This is the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies. It has a nice website that has there's a section for consumers that lists all kinds of self-help books that are from the CBT perspective. There's also for members and for professionals, a lot of information on there. And they actually give self-help book awards. So you could look and see what some of the books are that are listed there. There's a lot of information on the website. There's another website sponsored by the Society for Clinical Child and Adolescent Psychology, which is putting this workshop on in conjunction with the Children's Trust and FIU. Effective Child Therapy, all one word, .org. effectivechildtherapy.org. And you could look on their website because it gives parents, again, and also professionals direction for what kinds of therapies to look for based on different childhood problems. and also has resources that go with that. Effectivechildtherapy.org. AssociationABCT.org, Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies. Effectivechildtherapy.org is actually a combination website of the Society for Clinical Child and Adolescent Psychology and ABCT. We joined forces. I was actually president of ABCT at the time. I was secretary of clinical child psychology, and we helped to get this together because we were doing very similar, the same things in trying to promote effective treatments. And those have very good self-help books on them and such. And I would say keep looking at the website here from the Center for Children and Families, and what these workshops are going to continue to be coming online, because we're going to be adding more and more resources as we move along for families and for therapists, and for making available resources and materials to you. Okay? So in talking with teenagers, with teenagers you could talk very much more, depending again on who they are, you can talk much more directly about biological processes, the fight or flight response, where it originates from, what it feels like. You could talk very much about the fact that while certain processes like breathing and heart beating and some of these things are not under your complete control, you actually can bring some of it under your willful control of slowing down your breathing, slowing down your heart rate, And similarly for anxiety, you can bring it under your control for how you react, to what range you react in terms of expression, and then, how to manage it. And so we work with them about that, and, a lot of times with the teenagers, it's like, why me? It's not a woe is me, but it is a why me? What the heck? And they ask you this a lot of times as they compare themselves to their sisters and brothers, or compare themselves to cousins and then to other friends. Why do I have to deal with this, and where did it come from? And so we talk about all the things we went through earlier in this workshop. We lay it out. Some of the slides I presented to you, I have in a poster form. The risk factor slide and what sets off anxiety. We've got those, and we use them in teaching and educating the teenager about where these things, how things evolve. But focusing mainly on, while you can't control the genes you got, you can, and some experiences in the world are going to happen. Hurricanes are going to hit Florida again. And, sorry, look what comes to the front row. It was amazing this workshop. The front row brought them all out. Okay. So let me back up. The Marlins won't win the series again. How's that one? Is that easier to deal with or worse? So there are experiences in the world that you don't have control over. And, again, at the core of anxiety is wanting to have control, right? And you're not always going to control a situation. But you can take control of your reactions and what you do with what you've learned in that situation. So developing thinking traps tends to increase anxiety. We're going to teach the teenager, and we talk to them about how to learn different ways of managing, to get out of the thinking traps, and then also to stop the escaping and avoiding. So this is where knowledge is power. All right, and that begins in the first session that we work with. Yes?
Respond to knowledge, so if I say, what's the probability of something of this nature happening? Like, what's the probability? Yes, meteorites hit the planet. What's the likelihood one's going to hit here today when you're sitting here? Does that work in any way?
It does. It really does when you start working with teenagers. The teenagers who give me a rough time on probabilities are the adolescents who are smart and also are Asperger's. And the mathematicians, the minds of the mathematicians, yes, but at the 0.0007 probability, it's like, oh my goodness. So the point there is, you could talk to them about likelihoods. Come on, what's the realistic likelihood? Right. And that's where we get at, is working with that. But the thing in cognitive restructuring, what we'll get to in a second, is, okay, there may be different likelihoods of events happening, more than you would want, But what else can you do in a situation that changes the likelihood of a negative event happening? And I'll just say this case in point is the idea from a teenager with social anxiety, no one is going to talk to me if I go to the school dance, so what's the point? So, okay, what's the likelihood of that is low to medium, depending upon how visible as a teenager you've been interacting with peers. But what would increase the probability of someone talking to you? What if you were to walk and hang out and stand by the food table, as opposed to hanging out in the back of the auditorium? So we talk about the way that you can psych yourself into reasonable, realistic ways of changing the probability. You have more control in that situation over getting someone to talk to you than you have in winning the lottery by buying lottery tickets, 100 of them at a time, right? So that's what we would work with that. Yes?
Not necessarily talking about a teenager, but what about the people with anxiety that believe that you can change the probability by worrying?
Oh, yes. That is the crux of generalized anxiety disorder. You find that mostly in adults because they've developed this way. They stay engaged in worry as a way of preventing the event from occurring. It's a bit of superstitious conditioning on their part. But the other thing is what we teach them and we talk about there is the act of worrying and your engagement in it is actually avoidance of coping. So you are wasting your time, increasing your negative feelings, and not dealing with a situation. So worry is actually an active avoidance of coping. Okay? And so, in there, what the person is doing is they're staying engaged in uncertainty, and it's because they don't want to face certain uncertainties that maybe have a higher likelihood or whatever. So we'll go after that. We work. GADs are tough. Adult GADs are tough because there's a lot of realistic negative outcomes to certain things that are going on in the world, especially now, economic issues, job issues, housing issues. Oh boy, there's some realistic negative things going on. But your engagement in sitting and stewing is not going to help prepare you to cope with what may happen or help you to deal with things in a way that lessens a blow that might be inevitable in terms of like a foreclosure or something like that. There are things you can try to do. And I mean, just from someone that I was working with, if you're really worried about your house and foreclosing and this and that, why are you holding on to that timeshare you go to all the time? And taking the family to the timeshare at Disney World and spending a whole lot of money there, And there's the magical idea, no, not magical, but the idea, well, the kids, though, they need some fun. And, okay, create the fun here at home in different ways, but not where you're spending more money and worrying then about bigger, So anyway, you got to get in a whole big thing with.
A staycation instead of vacation.
It's a staycation. Yeah, that's right. So you got to work with that. So somatic management. In somatic management with our teenagers, as with younger kids and adults, we want to give them ways like the belly breathing we did earlier, or the progressive muscle relaxation training, mindfulness meditation, of managing their level of arousal, keeping steady state as much as they can, especially when there's events that are planned that are going to challenge them. Well, instead of ruminating up to the point of the event, let's practice some letting go, some deep breathing and things like that. Or if something happens that, shocks and surprises right away, like a pop quiz in the test or something along those lines, how in the moment to do deep breathing, take some time to keep yourself calm and think rationally. My niece goes to school up in Boca in a high school there. Sitting in my office one day doing some work, all of a sudden my text messaging, and there she is, like 1 in the afternoon. Oh my, OMG, oh my God, I have to give a talk. What can I talk about? Okay, you know, what's the class? Speech. Okay, you know, so back and forth we go with, you know, in the moment. And she, you know, she gets a little anxious about public speaking, a little. So anyway, we worked through a couple of ideas very quickly. I'm thinking to myself, my brother's going to call me later saying, my kid got bounced out of school and it's because of you for the texting. But in the moment, stop, calm yourself. What can you do? Whoa, let me calm down here and then take on this task. And the important thing for somatic management is for individuals to develop a tolerance for normal levels of arousal and also of surprise arousal. You have to tolerate it and not freak out in the moment. Because if you can do that, you know, then you stick with the situation. What many individuals do as the arousal comes on in anxiety is they use that experience to say, I'm getting out of here. Wait a minute. What if you stayed and wrote it out? Because what they're doing is they're escaping at the moment of anxious arousal that may actually be normal for the situation. The cute guy or girl that you like is approaching you. I got to get out of here. Whoa. What if you stayed? Prom date, you know. Or, you know, the shutdown when you're called on. Give it a second. You might have the answer or you might learn something from it. But staying in the situation and dealing is important. And so we teach them at the first feeling of arousal, learn to ride the wave is what they say. And there's actually a treatment manual for treating panic disorder in teenagers, and it's called Riding the Wave. Learn to ride it out, not try to escape from it. We also want them to learn these somatic management strategies so they can calm themselves at times when they're under stress or in a task that's particularly challenging to them. Cue-controlled relaxation is where you start out with those 16 muscle groups. You're tensing your hands and tensing the arms, pulling in the stomach. You go through 16 different muscle groups. If you Google progressive muscle relaxation training, you will get tons of scripts and different things. And what happens is oftentimes you start with 16 muscle groups, then they take it down to doing 8. So do your arms and hands at once, do your legs at once. Then they take it down to 4. And then the point is to go to what's called the cue. And that is just using the word in your mind, calm or relax, to let go. Now we'll get kids, actually even younger kids love this. We teach them relaxation training with their families, and they practice it at home. We have them teach it to their parents when they're younger. The teenagers were doing this on their own. With mom and dad are not in the room for relaxation training. But then with the little ones, again, we take stickers. And they get to pick what stickers they like. And we send a package of these stickers home with the parents. And this is the relaxation game. Wherever they see, whenever they come across a sticker, they are to stop and relax on cue of the sticker. So mom and dad have a good time hiding stickers. Where do I recommend they hide them? On the mirror in the bathroom, because you're going to brush your teeth every day. There's a sticker. Inside the whatever notebook they use for school, so it's on a notebook or a pencil case. For parents where there's cars, on the headrest behind the driver's head. Don't you want those kids in the back seat to be belly breathing instead of right? So put the stickers all over the place on the channel changer. There's different places to put the stickers, and when they find them, and you can play a little game too when they're younger of, you know, Mom, look, I'm doing my belly breathing, here's a sticker, and then, you know, they get a token for it. Yes?
To go back to the part where you said, well, don't get excited when the child get a little, you know, erection. My son, he'll be 15 tomorrow. And so what happened was, he was 11, and 3 days he'll be 12. So I was in the kitchen, I was cleaning up, and he yelled, Mom, come here. So I'm like, I freaked and I ran in the bathroom, and then he goes standing. He said, I think it's broken. I said, what do you mean you think it's broken? I was washing kind of hard and got excited, and this stuff started coming out. I think it's broken. And I couldn't do it but laugh because of the simple fact that I've never got around to telling him.
Right?
He told me, so he said, I think it's broken. I said, no, baby, it's not broken. I said, it's normal.
Yep.
I just got a little excited for watching it kind of too hard. So I thought that was the funniest thing.
It was. That's a whole nother workshop, isn't it, Mom? Wow. But you know what? But good for him. I bet. I don't want to touch that one. Never mind. Literally. Edit. The thing, your reaction. Now, this is a situation where the parent's reaction is what's important. And normalizing the situation. And, honestly, in teenagers with, we do, or in adolescents as they're developing, some kids who are less prepared than others get scared about certain things. Nighttime emissions and various things like that, the onset of menses, So, again, this is parent-child variables, family, the way the family beliefs and practices are and stuff. So how you handle it with calm is so important. So now you have a well-functioning 15-year-old. So there you go. So very good. The other issue with somatic management that we don't tend to talk a lot about with our younger children in anxiety, and maybe we will as we move along, but really with teenagers, this focus on healthy habits. Healthy eating improves overall physical and mental health, and we need to work with teenagers here very carefully because you want to be, of course, when you're assessing teenagers, working with the issues of eating disorders and things like that, you got to be careful to listen to what's going on. You want to work within cultural practices, too, with families. Riding the New York City subways are very interesting to see babies in carriages with bottles that have soda in them, baby toddlers with bags of Doritos and stuff, and then also just, different cultural practices in terms of the foods that are eaten, and then what fast food and how much of that is consumed and stuff in families. Well, we've got, now a national agenda to address the obesity epidemic in kids. We still also have to worry about not just obesity, but eating disorders in terms of anorexia and bulimia. So especially with our adolescents, you want to assess around these things and then work with them in education around how to take care of themselves. The big thing with anxiety in adolescents, like I was saying with my teenager who would eat in the bathroom, then there are those who don't eat during the day. And one of the keys in asking about that in their fear of eating in front of others is whether when they come home they're ravenous because they haven't eaten. And there's a lot of excuses. I don't have time between classes. There's so many healthy cereal-type bar alternatives, protein bar alternatives, that kids don't have to go hungry. An apple in the pocket that they can carry. But you've got to work around, is it a fear of eating in front of others, and helping them then to develop some habits about how to eat and also exposing them to eating in front of others with you. We'll talk about that in a minute. Physical exercise is very important. There's studies going on that are showing, demonstrating that exercise helps to prevent or lessen depression. And it's also implicated in anxiety. It's very good for mood disorders and anxiety disorders. And a big thing with teenagers is getting them to exercise with a friend. So it becomes a social issue. And I encourage using journals to track healthy behaviors, not just exercising, but also when they're doing some good meditation or deep breathing, or they've done something to soothe themselves. I work with teenagers in journals and keeping journals to do things like this. The thing I could tell you about the exercise with the teenagers we work with is it is a little easier for us, for the kids who are using public transportation, because I'll ask them to start getting them to exercise, to walk in extra 10 blocks it typically is, to the next subway station, not just the one that's very close to your house. That's something as simple as that, as just walking a little bit further to catch a ride. Things like that are important, using stairs. and things, helps to start at least getting them thinking. Take an extra walk around the block before going in the house at night when you get home. Helps to get them thinking about how to manage their exercise habits a bit better. This is just, yes?
Something in terms of not being overly precautious with young, like in that situation, is it increasing their anxiety to say, yeah, you can walk the 10 blocks, but I want you to have pepper spray. You know what I'm saying? Or like,
Well, this,
like,
that brings up a good
or teach
point.
them, street smart.
It's going to be, right.
Before they just go 10 blocks in a big city like New York.
Absolutely. It's going to be we always have to take into account are issues of safety. And what is the neighborhood, what are they like and all. Now, quite frankly, maybe I'll do a little bit of Big Apple promoting here. We're safer than you think. We are safer than you think. I have to say, when we left New York for Florida, the family, it was like several families caravanning down, happened in Brooklyn that my cousin was a teenager, one of the guys, and he was mugged and his bicycle stolen from him. He was 14 at a place called Prospect Park. When I moved back to New York in '98, actually after a couple years, I wound up moving there to right to Prospect Park. My cousin now in his 40s is like, what are you doing? You're crazy. It's like a crazy place. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's safe. I mean, it's beautiful there. So it's safer than you think, but at the same time, we definitely have to take into account issues of safety. Look, when we work with...
So my point was, is it producing more anxiety, and some people who may be already anxious?
Well, we may ask them to walk, but we may ask them to walk and purposefully, not because of exercise, but because they're afraid of being outside alone in reasonable areas and neighborhoods. So we may do that. When we work for a more concrete example of taking issues of safety and how to approach things into consideration is when I work with children and adults who are phobic of certain animals, especially dogs. We can bring the nicest dog in the world into the clinic, a 15-year-old near-dead lab. They essentially lay there and they let the kids do whatever they want to them. But nonetheless, they're still, they could nip if they are stepped on or something. So when we work with animals that are unpredictable, there's an element of unpredictability to that. We always have to be careful. We teach the kids how to approach an animal. More than anything, put your hand, let it sniff you, how to look, next to the dog on the ground, you look next beside it, not straight at it, all kinds of stuff. We talk about and train and teach the kids safety and what is reasonable behavior interacting with the dogs or the snakes or the bugs that we use, whatever the different animals are. And the same thing with situations. The same thing especially with approaching someone to ask for directions. How to assess who of the people on the corner of Broadway and 57th am I going to approach? And we do. We send the kids down to approach somebody and things like that. We talk about all these kinds of safety. What time of day are you doing these things? What is important and reasonable for you? So that has to be taken into consideration always. Yes?
Oh, me, okay. Yep. I had a question kind of going along that. What would you do in an exposure if, the thing that they are worried about happening does happen?
Oh, I'm going to talk about that. You know what? I celebrate it. I celebrate to a point, depending on the situation, when things don't go the way you want them to. I'm going to talk about, remind me to say, because it's about the guy in the bathroom, all right? And not her son, wherever she went. So this is one of the monitoring forms we use, time and place, people present, things I did or said, things other people said or did, things I felt in my body, things I thought, and their anxiety ratings. This is an example of getting monitoring started. We want to help teach the kids to pay attention to the three components of anxiety, what triggers them, how they react, what happens then as we move along, as we get into cognitive restructuring and exposure, watching that anxiety drop as they stay in situations and address the realistic thinking they need. So monitoring is very essential for CBT. Now, the cognitive component, cognitive restructuring, is key. Providing correct information about anxiety and threat is important and critical through psychoed, but identifying the automatic thoughts and treating them as guesses, hypotheses, not as facts. This is one of the things that happens to an anxious individual. They absolutely believe the negative thing is going to happen, 100% likelihood that that meteor is going to hit my house. So we have to treat them as hypotheses and develop a way, thinking realistically, of what alternative hypotheses there may be besides the catastrophic one. So these are called rational responses. We want to get to rational responding. We ask the kids to question the evidence, question the situation as they are thinking of it unfolding. Am I 100% sure that if I go into the school dance and stand close to the front where everybody is gathering, that no one will talk to me at all? Am I 100% sure if I go off to the day camp that my parents have signed me up for, and that no one is going to be nice to me while I'm there? You know, realistically, what is the likelihood that that's going to happen? What evidence do I have that that will happen? Now, some kids might have some evidence from being rejected or not included in the past, but let's look at different ways of managing now that maybe changes from the way you were managing things in the past. So maybe in the past some incidents occurred, but how can we do this differently? Does so-and-so's opinion reflect that of all the other kids in my class? This is something, excuses. Here's a trap parents have to look for. Mom, I really don't want to go to the prom. All the kids in my class are doing drugs, and I don't want to be a part of that. Wouldn't you love that kid? What a smart, mature kid. But let's really pull that one apart. All of the kids in my class or school are doing drugs. Miami High School, how many in each grade? 1,000? 1,000 kids? All the kids are on drugs? You got to think about this. Sometimes the excuses sound so very mature. I'm not into that stuff like my friends are. You know, I've matured differently than them. Oh, good for you. But wait a minute. No. This is a way of getting at, it's engaging the parents and then you too in seeing that they're not wanting to do the terrible things that kids fall into. But really, we got to pull that apart because something is frightening them, and it's not the drugs. Because most parents will work out with their teenagers around parties and school events. Hey, listen, you got my number. You call me if you need. What's the signal? And in New York, I work with parents around this. What is the signal if you need to be picked up? No questions asked. We're there for you. All right. My parents did that with me. And stuff, and you know, and that worked. Of course, we had those wall phones back then we had to use, but now it is so convenient. Mom, come get me, and mom can come get you. So we've got to look. You know, what can I do to cope and handle this situation is very important. Yes, question.
Automatic thoughts, are these the same as cognitive distortions?
Yes, automatic thoughts, cognitive distortions. Here's the thing, when Aaron Beck developed his approach, if you think in terms of an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg are the automatic thoughts. What you see above the surface, the immediate, oh no, I can't do this, everybody's going to hate me, I'm going to make a fool of myself. All right, that's the automatic thought. You question that thought. And if that happens, what will happen to you next? Okay, so I can't go to that I can't go to that camp. Nobody's going to talk to me. And if nobody talks to you, what will happen? Well, I'm going to feel really embarrassed, and I'm going to wind up, being all by myself. And then what's going to happen? Well, then, but the kids there are going to tell other kids who eventually it's going to get back to my friends at school. And when I get back to school in the fall, they're going to know that I was a loser. And then you got to question and question and dig deep under the water. And usually what we find are these core fears of being rejected, core fears of humiliation, core fears that are feeding, the automatic thoughts. But the automatic thoughts are the first, and then there's more of a story that is with it, of a bigger picture that they are thinking about that could happen to them. And so you get those out through questioning.
In mind as I'm asking this, and I realize that there's like a meltdown of emotions when this happens. So first, I guess it would be relaxation to get them to then engage, and it would have to be somebody engaging in this type of dialogue so that the person asks themselves.
Well, we're moving on into how to coach yourself and how to coach your kids and how to coach as a therapist. But this is the thing. They jump to these negative conclusions, and they're not giving themselves a chance to really understand, and question the veracity of their thoughts and also the scenario that they're painting in their mind. One of the things for teenagers, we use cue cards. And, one of the questions is, in challenging your thinking, how would an objective observer handle this? Standing outside, it's not you, someone else, how would they see the situation? You going into a camp, you going into the school dance, you walking up to the teacher and asking for a help session. What if you saw a friend struggling with this situation? What would you advise them to do? These kids can give some good advice to others, And what are alternative explanations for this situation? Getting them to stop and think is important. The key to cognitive restructuring is role-playing and getting those thoughts out. Role play, role play, role play. Where are my role players? Come on up. I'm going to do a little role play here. And we're going to set this scene up to be a teenager and her mom. We'll make the tall one the mom, okay? How's that? Teenager and the mom. And here we are in our session together. This is a little bit of parent coaching along with the teenager. And the idea here is, this is my teenager and family who moved to New York from the South when she was 13. You were very anxious all through your childhood. And Mom, you have a little bit of anxiety too. And you didn't like to move to New York, but your husband got transferred, so you had to do it. And you live uptown, but her school is downtown. It's all safe area and, one train. And, there are things after school that you think about doing, but you're anxious about doing. You can't take her back and forth to these things because you have your other kids at home. And anyway, you wouldn't want her going on the subway alone, so it's not going to happen. So let's get at this. So what's going on with you in terms of stuff going on at school in the next couple of weeks that we might be able to help you get into?
Well, I really want to try to join the drama club, but I don't think I can. I don't think I'll have time for that.
The drama club, what does that do? What do they do in drama club?
Well, one thing, you can do a lot of things. You can be an actor and be on stage, but you could also help direct.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's something I might want to try.
Well, that sounds interesting. What's going on with time? Why wouldn't you have time?
Well, Mom can't really take me there, so it's too late because of my brothers and sisters at home, so she's not going to be able to.
Okay.
That's true.
All right. What are your thoughts about? What are your thoughts about, though, about an activity like that? Do you have any idea?
I think it sounds fine if it would work out. It's just not going to work out. But if it did, it would be fine.
It's something that you've enjoyed helping out in things like this, and being a part of what puts things together, as opposed to being the actress in front of the stage.
Well, I haven't tried it before, but I think I would rather do that than be the actress.
Okay. all right, but, and what, if I'm understanding correctly, you're down in, or you're really up on the Upper East, and your school is Midtown, so there's that, you know, this number 6 train goes up and down, is that?
But I have to pick her up to be back in time to pick up her little brother, and I can't go back downtown to drop her off for her drama club.
I
It's at
see.
5 o'clock, so.
It ends at 5, okay. What about taking the subway in, you know, for your daughter? She's 16, she's a junior, she's a, you know, junior, 16. Let me ask a question. Do you want to go to college?
Yeah, she does.
Where would you like to see her go?
Well, I think there are, you know, that's ultimately going to be her decision, somewhere in state probably. There are a lot of good colleges in
In
the city.
California.
In New York and California. But
Or somewhere in state.
it's okay. So SUNY Buffalo,
I
Stony
heard
Brook.
it's a good school.
All that, yeah, good. So, you know, but you know, when that bridge comes, you're definitely going to want to cross over to college, and you want her to go to college
do.
somewhere. Okay.
That's important.
Are you going to drive her to classes?
Well,
Come on. What do you think about that, though? I mean,
Thinking about-
she's 16 and a junior in high school.
There's a difference, though, between being in high school and being in college.
Tell me about that, because college is 2 years from now. What's the difference going to be?
Well, she'll be an adult then. She's not an adult now.
How did you get ready for being out on your own when you were a kid?
Well, I didn't grow up in the city. It's dangerous here. I grew up in a small town, and you knew who your neighbors were. So,
Right.
so I drove myself to school.
You drove.
Yeah,
Wow.
but you could do that back then.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
driving. Okay, but still, you know, driving, you know, there's places where they don't, you know, they want to change the legal driving limit because of the teenagers, you know,
Yeah,
impulsivity and things. But, you know, let's think about this. Have you yourself been on the subway?
I have been on the subway with my husband.
Okay, and, you know, is it something that you yourself are a little anxious about, or?
Well, I don't go. I mean, no, I don't go on the subway.
I wonder if the 3 of us took a couple of excursions up and down, you know, the 6th line, which is, I think, what runs between your school and your house, and just took a look and, you know, how it works to get on it and who's on it after school, you know, and how quickly you could get from one place to another. What do you think about just trying that out with me and your daughter?
Well, I gotta be honest. It makes me nervous.
And what is it that you're afraid of? Let me ask that.
Subway is dangerous. That's why I go with my husband. It's dangerous.
What is it that's dangerous about it? Now, I ride it every day, and I have been, yeah, ride it for an hour each way. What is it that is dangerous?
Well, I mean, there are strangers down. I mean, you don't know who anyone is.
Did you ever look at, while you were on the subway, you ever really pay attention to what other people are doing?
They're doing a lot of things, but I'm not worried about everybody. I'm worried about that one person who maybe has
So here's,
vile thought.
okay, but here's another question for you. What do you want to teach your daughter about assessing situations anywhere?
Well, I want her to grow up to be safe and a good citizen, and to have a family, and I want her, I want her to be able to do those things. But she's a child.
Okay, oh, well, she's an adolescent. What do you think about the subway? Have you ridden the subway?
Well, with my mom and dad.
What have you seen gone on the subway that's been scary to you?
I don't know, it kind of looks cool, but it's not scary when I'm with them.
Do you have friends who ride the subway?
A couple.
And have you heard of negative things happening? Now, the thing, like, because there's, at times,
No, I mean, we don't really talk about it.
so it's matter of fact for the kids.
I think so.
Okay.
They're used to it. I'm not used to it, though.
Well, that's one of the things. Were you anxious when you first started driving? of like the other drivers? Because you can't control other people on the streets.
Absolutely.
And how did you overcome that anxiety, if you did?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways I got used to it, but you also have to have your guard up when you have to be a defensive driver.
Absolutely. That's right. And I think we also can be reasonable in if you really want to do something after school, and as we've been trying to work on here, her developing for you more of a sense of independence and less anxiety about taking on new situations, which is one of the big things we've talked about, and especially situations involving other people. Let's think through a few things. One is we're confident in the school. Is that right? You like her school
Oh, yes.
and the activities and the things that go on. Like this drama club at the school would be fine, right?
Yeah, I've never been to an event where they don't have a teacher present.
Okay. So the question becomes how to teach you to be comfortable and confident and safe in managing a little bit of independence for an after-school activity. What is reasonable in terms of things that may occur that can cause you a little bit of disruption?
Well, I will concede that probably most of the time that she rides the subway, maybe nothing would happen, but you don't know when there are going to be gang members or just teenagers in general that are up to no good, or someone tries to sell her drugs.
Okay.
Or
But now here's what I want to say about this now, something to be mindful of. We're going to talk about your confidence in what you will do in a situation that starts to look a bit uncomfortable. So, for example, even now, we talked a couple weeks ago, your mom had dropped you off at a party, and if I remember correctly, you called to be picked up because some of the kids started drinking. What do you think of that? That was
smart.
That was good judgment on her part.
Absolutely.
Okay? That, I hope, gives you confidence that if we teach, together we learn how to ride the subway. One of the things, for instance, I taught my kids is when you get on a car, you sit close to the door and with people, and if there's anything strange looking on the car, you know, if there's not a lot of people, you don't go on.
What if there's no space and I can't sit near the door?
Typically, you're standing by the door then. Then oftentimes, you're right at the door, you know. But the thing of it is, it's assessing the situation. And it's, as you say, you yourself said, it's very rare that things happen. And so there's that, you know, that's the kind of thing we'd look for. The other thing is, and the biggest thing that happens is running out of money on the Metro card. So having enough money. And what would you do if you didn't? Let me ask you, if you didn't have enough money, let's say, to ride the subway, and you were after school, what would you do?
Call my mom.
Okay. And there, I mean, in, you know, New York, your mom would say, jump in a cab, and somebody would be waiting to give you the cash at the end, or she'll come pick you up. Oh, my goodness. What do you think about, you know, things like that? Sounds like she always has her cell phone and is always able to call you.
If she charges it.
If she charges it, okay. So let's think about that as, you know, because what we're dealing with is what realistically would happen on the number 6 train, which runs up and downtown in Manhattan, a straight shot. Typically, there's it's after school kids, most of them reading. There's a lot of Kindles, people minding their own business. And it would save you time and stress and get you home. Actually, you'd be able to do what you want to do with exploring this and get home faster than in traffic. 15 minutes on the subway equals 40 minutes in the car. So let's think about it. And what is to be gained, though, is the question. For you, what's to be gained if you were to practice this with us and think it was reasonable to do?
Well, my guidance counselor was saying it was good to have these extracurriculars for college, so I'd get to have that on my record.
So it'd be good for your record. What about for you yourself? How do you think what's your feelings about this and your thoughts about this?
Well, I think it would be really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'd make more friends.
Okay, so it's an optimistic look at that.
What's to be gained for me?
Yeah, yeah,
outside of my ulcer.
yes. Mm-hmm.
I want you to make friends. I want you to be part of your school. I want that for you. So I guess that's to be gained. I'm just scared.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my baby.
So that's why I think we'll do it together several times and show her how and you how, and we'll come up with the contingency plans. Because when she does go to college, whatever's going on, you're going to have given her some contingency plans. She wakes up with a sore throat, what to do. She runs out of laundry detergent, what to do, and all kinds of stuff. And this is part of it, getting herself around to places too. Sound all right? All right.
Like, we'll try it.
Yay, Mom. Yay. Thank you. So that's a little bit of restructuring the thoughts in both of them, on both of them, and dealing with not just the anxiety aspect, but also a transition issue. Here's one of the main things is these role plays. Many people don't do enough of them. That's one of the biggest failings in community practice, is not doing enough of these role plays. So we've got to do it, do it, do it. You can't do enough. Supplement with having the teenager take notes afterwards, and the mom. Using cue cards is also good to do. And this is an illustration that pre-treatment with social phobia, the red are positive thoughts, yellow are neutral, green are negative. Pre-treatment, at post-treatment, the neutral thoughts are increasing. Notice positive and negative thoughts are decreasing. Positive and negative. And by 12-month follow-up, we have neutral thoughts are out there. Positives have disappeared, and negatives are around, but not significantly lowered. The issue here is positive thinking doesn't give you coping-focused plans and tasks to manage the situation. These are magical thoughts. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to ace this test. Everybody is my friend. These are not realistic thoughts. This slide from our Adolescents with Social Phobia illustrates what Phil Kendall, who's one of the leaders in child anxiety, has written about years ago called healthy thinking. Healthy thinking is non-negative thinking. It's not positive. It's non-negative. It's realistic, task-focused, and coping-focused in its mode. All right? And healthy thinking can be very neutral. Sitting in front of a test that's handed out to you, the healthy thinking is, let me take some deep breaths. Task-focused and neutral. Let me take some deep breaths. Let me go through the questions I can answer first. Remind myself that I listened in class and took notes. Let me divvy up my time to the multiple choice and then the essays. Healthy thinking is focused on the task and not on how you feel or how great it's going to be. All right? So very task-focused. The goals of behavioral exposures, now notice I said I was going to be riding the subways. The goals of behavioral exposures is to get experience in the situations that are frightening to you. And what I had here was a mom and a daughter who were both frightened. Mom more than the kids. So that's why I said, let's go all of us together. So performing the thing they're afraid of is key, central to overcoming anxiety. The more the teenager or anyone with anxiety has avoided, the less experience they actually have with the situation. So it allows those catastrophic thoughts to flourish because they don't have actual thoughts that are based on experience necessarily of coping with the situation. And there may have been a couple of events that got to them that sent them running, but they haven't gathered more experience with the situation to counter those events. So with exposures, we use the items from their fear and avoidance hierarchies, and we expose them gradually to increasingly challenging situations. Now, mostly we do real situations. Imaginal situations we reserve for things that are hard to recreate, and especially like maybe an OCD, a fear of stabbing people. We'll expose them to that image in their imagination, not in actuality. But we will, at the time I'm doing that exposure, have them handling a knife. Okay? So exposure, we tend to go in the situation, starting with the lowest on their hierarchy and working their way up, and practice this over time and decrease the use of safety signals as they move along. Mom is a safety signal in this riding the subway, but we're going to eventually have mom off the subway, right? And having the teenager do it herself. It's going to take me, with that family, it would take me one session really working with mom, taking a couple of rides up and downtown, and then getting off and letting the teenager ride uptown and then come back down to meet us again. I have to say this is great. I had a resident in psychiatry who I was working with training him, and he was doing an exposure for a teenager with panic and didn't like, the teenager had panic disorder and stuff and didn't like riding subways. I had him take the teenager down the ride on the subway, go a stop, get off, let the teenager ride a stop without you. Anyway, long story short, he lost the teenager in the subway. So I'm sitting in my office and I get this panicky phone call, Dr. Albano, I lost the teenager. I don't know where he is. I'm like, In the meantime, my other phone rang, and it was the teenager's father. Hey, my son said that Dr. A, this other doctor, took off somewhere, but so he's worried about him, but my son is fine. The teenager actually knew exactly what to do. He went upstairs onto the street where the cell phones work, and he called his dad and say, oh, Dad, I'm at 34th Street, and I'm going to come back uptown, and I'll meet you there, but I lost the doc. So anyhow, it was great. We want experiences to go wrong. So that right there was showing the teenager himself learned that he could cope with the situation. The doctor is still in therapy. Exposures are everywhere. Exposures are everywhere. Riding the bus, returning items to a store, as I said, turning in a job application. I take my socially phobic groups to improvs and open mics and have them do stuff. It is so much fun. Going on interviews, dealing with the unknown miscommunications, doing things like that. One of the things I have actually, what's great about this is New York is great. The clinic is on the corner of Broadway and 57th. And so the Broadway there's buses up and down Broadway. And it is crowded. We are a couple of blocks off. We're right at Central Park and a few blocks off of Times Square. So anyhow, I have a stack of these Metro cards that are expired, have no money on them. Stacks of them. Say to the teenagers, okay, we're going to go downstairs, and some of these cards have money and some don't. I don't know which are which. I'm going to get on the bus and use the card. What do you think is going to happen? So this is an exposure. They write down what their predictions are. The bus driver's going to yell at you. The people are going to be mad. Someone's going to push you. Okay, rate how strongly you believe that these negative things will happen from 0 to 100. Okay, now let's go downstairs. And sometimes it's a group of teenagers standing there with me. Sometimes it's one. Then I wait, the bus comes, I get on the bus. And of course, there's a lot of people, it's Broadway. And I start, put the card in, beep, take it out, whoops. Put another card in, beep, take it out. Put another, beep, take it out. What do you think invariably happens? The kids are all standing there watching this. Behind me, what do you think happens?
Somebody pays for it.
Somebody pays for it. Usually the bus driver says, go ahead. Now, what is happening to the teenager? What do you people think of New Yorkers? Oh, my God. Oh, man. Listen, really, she says, really? Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
They're in a rush. So
Yeah. 1 in 20 times you'll hear, come on, from somebody. All right, you're going to hear groans. And I have the kids keep track. The kids are just like, and then, of course, the bus driver says, go ahead. I say, oh, that's okay. And I get off the bus, The kids are like, wow. It's like, all right, your turn. So for the next bus, they've got to do it. And it's great experience with practicing with the unknown and with people's reactions. And it is wonderful when somebody acts up in some way, because I deal with it by ignoring it. Let me tell you about my guy. Remember?
Did you ever get on the bus?
Oh, well, it depends. No, a lot of times, no. Because the point there is not riding the bus, it's dealing with a negative social interaction, you see. If it is a teenager who the issue is riding the bus, we'll do bus riding. But it's more of, you can't control other people, but you can control how you react towards them. That's why we do surveys and things like that. My guy sitting in the bathroom, we actually developed our social phobia treatment for teenagers based on him, the young man who was gay, and also the young man who had no friends and had the the Revolutionary War guys, and there were several girls in the group too. And so what happened is, as we were going through, we had psychoeducation done, cognitive restructuring started, and we got to the point where we're doing exposures, and the exposure for this young man who would sit in the bathroom every day was to start going to after-school events. It was basketball season, fortunately, so basketball games were frequent. Go to basketball games. Now, initially, he would sit on the other team's side, but that's all right. Lo and behold, he comes back to group and says, one day, some girl called me. Oh, okay, so a girl took notice. This girl was probably waiting for this guy to show up at an after-school thing because he was a nice kid. Next week, he comes back. Remember that girl I told you called me? Uh-huh. She asked me to take her to the junior prom. Now, wait. Now, here's a young man who had never been out on a date, had never been to a dance, right? Okay. We had 3 weeks. We had 3 weeks until the prom. What we did was, the next week, the kids had to come in dressed up, and our exposures were the prom and how dates could go. Now, here is the thing when it comes with these exposures. We define the situation. So the situation for this particular young man was you pick up your date and you were at the prom, or maybe it's in the car with your date and her friends, because he didn't have any. Or you're at the table with her and her friends. So define a situation. What are your goals? The goals must be observable. Ask 2 or 3 questions. Answer in full sentences. Make eye contact. Observable goals. Generate automatic thoughts. What are you afraid will happen? What's your thoughts about that? We go through cognitive restructuring. We choose a rational response. A lot of times, the anxiety for a socially anxious teen is no one will talk to me, or there'll be silence. And a rational response there is I'm only responsible for 50% of a conversation with 2 people, or 33 1/3 when there's 3 of us, or 25% when there's 4, and so on. So, and then we conduct 10-minute exposures. And we did this with him with different scenarios. The goals have to be, concrete and specific. We have to be able to monitor them, something under the patient's control, and attainable in terms of these goals. Just as an example, walking up to persons engaged in a conversation, introducing oneself, asking questions. Now, the thing with his exposures is if we just did happy date exposure, oh, she's nice, what we did is we role-played 10-minute exposures through the course of our hour and a half, and the other kids in the group actually had social anxiety too, so they were part of the role plays. Someone played his date, they were kids at the table. We did different things. We had, all different ways that this went so that everybody got exposed. But we would coach the role player who was like the girl who played his date. In this exposure, just be nice and go with the flow. In the next exposure, don't talk to him. In the next exposure, we had some of the other kids say rude things like, do you go to this school? I've never seen you. Things like that. Because he had to learn to deal with all the ways it goes. Now, what do you think happened at the prom? He went to the prom with her. She dumped him and took off with another guy at the prom. What do you think happened with our guy? He asked other girls to dance. He danced all night. Now, here's the thing, too. He came back and he said, if we had only did these exposures in a happy way, I wouldn't be back here today because I would have said, the heck with these people, I'm never going to get better. But he said it really prepared me. And he was right. You have to do realistic things. So when negative things happen, that's okay because you're focusing on how to cope. And that's why we role played in practice with things not going. You want to cry, really cry? I always cry when I talk about him. I can't help it. Towards the end of the group program, we had the parents come for exposures to see what they look like. And his exposure with the parents there was playing a musical instrument, a saxophone. He had taken music lessons since he was a little kid, but he would never do the recitals. So his parents were never allowed to hear him play unless they happened to hear him practicing, which he rarely did. So he played his saxophone for his parents and for the other group members. His mother thought that was a great success. When he finished that exposure of playing that saxophone, he walked over to her, took a spoon out of his pocket from the cafeteria. That was the big success for that exposure, yeah. Because he finally went into the cafeteria and he was eating in the cafeteria, and she, by this point, she learned about the pudding cups. And so there wasn't a dry eye in the room that day, I'll tell you. That was great. So that's, exposures. One of the things we do with our teenagers as we're trying to work more on transition tasks is we do scavenger hunts. And it's hunting for your independence in a lot of ways. For example, I do a lot with public transportation, but, the thing about parents are afraid she's going to get lost, she's not going to know what to do, things like that. So we'll actually give the teen, the parent will be sitting with us, and sometimes not. We'll give them an envelope, they open it up, and we're at 57th Street and Broadway, and they are told, go to the Brooklyn Bridge on the Brooklyn side. Oh, if you know New York, that's a long way away, and it involves a transfer on the subways. And they have to buy their own Metro card, so we're working on using money there. They have to ask at least 3 different people for directions. So here it's about safety issues. Who do you ask? The man in the suit or, the person who's, doing strange things. And they all have, most kids have picture phones. When you get to the ice cream shop at the Brooklyn Bridge that's over there, actually great pizza and ice cream over on the other side, have someone take a picture of you. Immediate reinforcement of what we're doing, and then they return, reverse the route and return. So these are some of the ways that we work with these transition tasks. We process the exposure afterwards, discussing how it goes and if there's been any anxiety that emerged during the exposure. You typically see pre-exposure, the anxiety is around a 50, it goes up to 65, 70, and over the course of the 10 minutes it comes down. And the learning issue here is staying in the situation and dealing with it. My anxiety will just go away. It'll be manageable. Things might happen that increase it a little here and there, but it's going to work. It's going to be working out.